Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the final installment of the three-part Trizons webinar series, Future of Commerce. Here we'll examine what the future of commerce looks like in a rapidly evolving landscape. I'm Ali Thiem, the editor of Power Retail, and it's lovely to have everyone here today. We have a really great lineup of panelists in store for you this afternoon, but before I introduce them, I do have a quick little bit of housekeeping. So if you have any questions for our panelists today, feel free to pop those questions in the little tab on the left-hand side of your screen, and we'll do our best to answer them at the end of the session. So today we are joined by Nick Kontopoulos, the head of Adobe DX Commercial APAC Marketing, Mark Aronston, SVP Commercial, and Jaimee Charlton, Brand Innovation and CX Spendless. Lovely to have you all here today.
Likewise.
Thanks.
So customer behavior has changed more than anything really in the last few months. It seems just absolutely crazy. And this three-part live panel series actually gives insights and practical tips on how to run an effective digital offering and meet expectations in the current retail climate. So today we'll explore these changes with Jaimee Charlton from Spendless as she takes us through the changing customer, how Spendless is adapting their strategies to reach a wider market and develop their in-house brands, as well as how they are applying the learnings from lockdown in the business moving forward. So starting with Jaimee, how do you see customer behavior in its shift in the first half of the year?
Yeah, well, so Spendless is a business that offers shoes to all stages of life. So I think the biggest thing that we found was there was a shift to an older demographic shopping online for the first time for us. So that was one of the areas that picked up. We had on our online chat, which is where I've spend a lot of time getting some customer data from the coalface. Instead of people saying, what shoes go with my blue dress, we were getting customers asking, how do I buy these shoes on my screen? There was a really big shift to people that had clearly never used a website before. So whilst we had those questions about my outfits, what's going to go with my outfits, well, all of a sudden that just disappeared. No one was going anywhere. So, but those older customers really, we're trying really hard. Like it was a really interesting space to play because we quickly learned that what we had to do was either get them offline, so give us a call, which a big number of them actually really appreciated given the shutdown, that they didn't really get to chat to too many people during the day anyway. So there was some really beautiful customer interactions from the old school phone, first off. And then we had to quickly work out, how, these things that we all take for granted. Everyone, we know how to just order some shoes online. So actually, what's the bare basics? What do we click on? And it was that real moment of, teaching your grandma how to use her new iPad. For us, was a whole new world.
Definitely a big change for a lot of customers that are used to brick and mortar stores going into an online. So how did you adjust your strategy during lockdown to keep in contact with your customers and continue to engage loyalty with them?
Yes, I mean, for us, our first, you forget how much of a scary time those first few weeks were, how terrifying they all were for all of us. So it wasn't really about the customers at that first point. Stores, we shut 210 stores, like everyone was stood down, like it was a really terrifying time. So for us, the focus was on our team member experience. It was how is our team going? How's everyone feeling? What are the different circumstances that are happening? When we first shut down, JobKeeper wasn't around yet, so there was this terrifying time of we're not sure how business is going to function, and it was really gut wrenching, and I think that as part of human nature we glossed over that pretty quick. Yes, it was a dark couple of weeks there, but to really remember being in the trenches there was really terrifying. So for us, it was about how's everyone going. Quickly, all of our leaders, our retail leaders, got all their guys into Facebook groups, and everyone, we had to connect everyone in a way that we'd never connected everyone back together before, to say we're here for you. We don't know what's going on, but as soon as we have something to tell you, we will be telling you really quick, because I think the big thing that we learned from this is that people can deal with the bad news. You're getting locked down again, or this is happening, but the not knowing is really it hurt. It's harder. It's harder to sort of, the mind wanders with what the hell's going on if we don't give them the certainties in what's going on. So I think from there, our digital strategy focused really quickly on team members. But I think one of the lessons that we've learned from the last couple of years in our brand growth and what we call our master brand, because as you mentioned, we have a lot of internal private label brands, and Spendless sits over the top of all of those. So what we call master brand, like what is the brand of Spendless versus what do the individual brands stand for? So what is that brand of Spendless that we've been working on over the last couple of years is we have this really great internal culture that we live by. It's not just posters on the wall. It's a way of life, and we talk about the Spendless way and how do you live each day the Spendless way internally, and so that went. So we went from having that inward focusing to outward focusing. So really, our messaging didn't change it to our customers. It was like, this is a really scary time. We don't really know what's going on, but we'll do our best to keep you as updated as possible with what it is. So then the next step was, right, this. As we started to open up stores again, everyone's safety, the cleanliness of the stores, like how are we going to make everyone feel really safe coming back into the stores and shopping with us? And that omni-channel, I think from every brand would sort of tell you that the click and collect really skyrocketed. People just wanted to pop in for what they needed and get out. We also focused on, when people are having a tough time and we're in that disposable income sort of bracket, how do we make people feel, if you're spending your money and you don't know how much more is going to be there, how do you make people feel good about those purchases, and how, the whole purpose of spending that money right now is to feel really good about having a good moment in the day, because the rest of it can be pretty ordinary. So those were some key things that we focused on early.
Fantastic. And just opening that up to Nick and Mark, have you seen any retailers or brands adjust their strategy to keep in contact with their customers that might have an omni-channel platform or had to close their brick and mortar stores?
I think it's safe to say across our, thanks Nick. I think it's safe to say across our customer base, every single one of our clients had to adjust their strategy or their customer engagement model significantly, and still making adjustments to evolving conditions. And I think that was just a really important point that Jaimee was making, is that these are and were uncharted waters, and I'm sure that everybody on the webinar today has probably heard these trying times and those sorts of slogans about what we're going through, but the reality is none of us have been through it. And largely in a brick and mortar network, customer experience is driven from a human to human connection. And so it's been really difficult for brick and mortar stores who perhaps were underinvested in digital to try and bring that experience online, particularly when they're dealing with, I guess, a bit of a capability gap. For other brands who were already digital leaders, it really gave them an opportunity to play with some fun ideas. There was definitely a broad shift in terms of helping their customers through, trying to shift content not necessarily related to product, but kind of trying to provide these moments in somebody's day to entertain them, or have a brand connection that was less about a new product or something that was solving a more product-based need. And so I think that's fair to say across our client base is that we've seen this rapid shift, trying to deal with the internal teams to try and help them feel safe in the environment and get certainty where certainty is possible, but also to try and make sure that they were making themselves relevant and, I guess, empathetic to their customers' experience more broadly in their day-to-day life as well. And so, yeah, I think customer behavior, huge shift online, which if you talk to anyone in the industry, they'll tell you that has meant an opportunity for customer acquisition. A lot of that business has been repeat business, not just one-off. And so there is a very big opportunity to have built new relationships and make a significant shift from the brick and mortar network into online, and that just changes perhaps the nature of the brick and mortar network in the overall customer experience. So, a real drive around click and collect is something that we're also seeing, Jaimee, and in particular, where stock has been locked up in stores and organisations are realising that certain capabilities are required to make sure that they can move that stock and come up with, I guess, innovative ways to do so, is all part of the response and strategy shift that they've made to try and address for the new world as it is at the moment. Nick, I'll be quiet, mate, and give you a chance to speak.
I think you couldn't have said it better, and Jaimee's a great case study in what she laid out there as being absolutely central to the success of any company, is its ability to have that empathy for its customers, but also its employees. I think sometimes we forget about that. And at the end of the day, we start with we're a family. We're all family in terms of the company we work within, and pivoting and making sure that they're secure and comfortable is obviously paramount. So again, great case study, Jaimee, that you laid out there in terms of example of a brand that really understood the importance of that. I think that I'm seeing that as a common denominator across the brands that we've got the privilege of working with, is being companies that have been able to work through this in a successful way, of being able to pull the team together. Because I think humans by nature, adversity, when we go through tough times, we pull together, and if we've got a leadership there that's helping pull that together, I think that's always a good thing. I think what we're going to see out at the back end of this, and Jaimee's touched on that as well as Mark, is that we're going to see a significant behavioral change in terms of consumers, especially in segments that we traditionally may not have seen engage through digital channels at the same rates they are doing so now. I mean, a Statista estimated that, I think it was by 2021, that 65% of the global population will be truly global. I think that was 2019. Yeah, so I think data was from 2019. I think based on what we're seeing now, that percentage is going to be, moving well and truly into the 80s or 90%. So I wouldn't be far. I wouldn't doubt it. And that's because we are seeing that sort of like, my mum's generation. I've talked to tradies that are buying online for the first time. So we've got some customers that are, Magento customers that are in the trades. They're seeing customers that, 60, 70-year-old guys that would normally come into the physical store, buying online. So that's, I think, the key thing we need to be now prepared for, is that behavioral change, that we're going to see going forward, because there's been an accelerated tipping point there, a forced tipping point. And so I would suspect that we'll see that, carry forward even once we move back out of lockdowns. And, I know Victoria's back in a lockdown at the moment, but once we see hopefully COVID-19 behind us, I think that behavior will carry on. I don't know if Mark and Jaimee would agree with me on that point. No.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. The amount of interest and conversations we're having with merchant and retailers out in the market at the moment, both client and otherwise, what we're seeing is, I think there's a realization about the economic conditions that we think we're going to go into, particularly in Australia, in terms of the various job seeker payments coming off, and Australia facing some slightly tougher times that will impact disposable income. I think there's a real shift amongst the execs that we're speaking with, who are thinking about, okay, what is our strategy to drive revenue from our loyal customers? Because I think the fight for the retail dollar is going to become increasingly more competitive, because it's obviously less available in the market. And so, thinking about various experiences that are more geared towards retention and driving revenue associated with loyalty is certainly an interesting area where we're getting a lot of interest. We're looking at new business models, so that ranges from businesses who typically had to deal with channel conflict, and now thinking about going direct to consumer because their main channel to market has been significantly disrupted. And it kind of has created an environment where they have to work with their retail partners to figure out a model that works for everyone. So we're seeing lots of different variations or permutations on marketplace type models, micro marketplaces, or range extension through dropship, purely because I just think there's a speed and flexibility in those models that allow you to adapt to market demand. We're also seeing, I personally think that, like a subscription-based model, the subscription commerce or relationship commerce is fairly immature in Australia compared to other markets around the world. And so we're seeing a lot of businesses look and think about how they can package up their products to make it more consumable for the customer. And sometimes these are intertwined into the experience, and others are setting up bespoke brands to go after that market. But with the entry of things like HelloFresh and Marley Spoon, there's definitely an appetite for that. I'm a animal owner. I have 2 dogs and 2 cats, so I spend an exorbitant amount of money on vet bills, unfortunately, but also a lot on pet food. And so, subscription models in that space are quite mature. So I think that this concept of what is our business model, and how can we test that in a way that is both economical but scalable, the sorts of conversations we're having at the moment, because they're looking forward to the conditions that we will be trading into, albeit conditions right now are uncertain. We still have to keep our eyes up and look at the next horizon, because I think that's where we'll be able to navigate and capitalize on the challenges that are presented to us at the moment.
Absolutely. And Jaimee, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, just from our point of view, I think with the for us, the customer is really dictating to us at the moment where we need to push our attention, the things that we need to do to make that digital experience better for them. So I think it's interesting, because I can get the reports as many as I like about the things that have been spoken about, but until you speak directly with the customers and you hear the tone of voice, there's a real it gives you real clarity on the things that are important right now. Why can't I? Why are your store hours not accurate or up to date? Right? Okay, that's really important right now in those times where they want to make sure that they do one shopping trip, or if you're in Melbourne, you've only got an hour to do your shopping trip a day or whatever it is. So, there's some really, it's so important to be flexible, but I really appreciate that, in a retail business where digital is such a small portion of our overall sales, and that the stores still are the big bulk of our sales drivers, that how do you quickly make quick changes in that digital space? They can very quickly add up, and it's just about making sure that the ones that you do sort of give you the bang for your buck, and that you're not disappointing the customers, because I think the worst thing you can do is ask your customers, what can we do better, and then not do them. So I think there's a lot of creativity having to be out there right now around how do we, these are the expectations. The customers have spent the time to tell us what they want. How do we now deliver on what they want in a way that we can afford when everything's so tight? For us in this fashion retail space, our sales, our weekly sales are very aligned to consumer confidence. So we're having, if people are feeling a bit better, the ScoMo comes out and gives us some good news. Sales are good that week. Something comes out and we have the news starts to push that JobKeeper's coming to an end and everyone's going to lose their jobs. Well, that consumer confidence backs off, and we can see it instantly in the sales to the day that press conference happens. So, I think that for us, we can see that link in spending to how people are feeling, and that's going to be really important going forward. And the fear that's around this. The media is quite, has a responsibility, to report accurately, but that to the excess fear that's going on, I think is really detrimental.
And we feel that on the other side as well, Jaimee, as a partner of organisations like yours and other retailers and merchants and operators, we see that confidence flow through, because that obviously impacts your ability to decide about investments. And so the trend that we're definitely seeing is a trend towards I guess what I'd call more micro projects that are, I guess, with a quicker time to value, a more test and validate and scale type mindset. And so that's definitely, we're seeing that trend on our side as well, apart from realizing that there's some foundational elements. I think being in as a e-commerce agency, I think, we're in an industry where perhaps we've at least avoided a large impact, because obviously a lot of investment has gone into digital, so we're quite fortunate in that regard. But what we have seen is a shift to how can we make sure we're filling foundational gaps, B, how do we add value to our existing investment rather than getting to large scale projects. And I think that that's certainly a trend that we'll see for a little bit. And so, obviously, if that's the demand from our clients, we're very busy looking in market about ways that we can do that, which is all in aid of creating connected customer experiences that have purpose and value both for the retailer and the customer. So it really resonated with me what you're saying there.
Yeah, actually, but if you don't mind me riffing off both you guys again, I think you both make really great points. The reality is for retailers, for a long time, retailers saw their physical stores as a liability, as a legacy asset, because obviously with the pure play digital brands coming online, they became a real competitive threat. But what I've been championing, and I've seen through actual brands I've had the good fortune to work with, is that that's actually a strategic asset and will continue to be so. It's how you marry the digital and physical together. Because the reality is, consumers will move across these different channels in a channelless way. I often talk about this notion of channelless customer. We don't think in terms of channels, and actually the data is backing this up. We just had a session yesterday with Simon Kemp with some really great data. If anyone's interested, just ping me a note on LinkedIn and I'll get you the report. But in there, there was a great reference to how people start their journeys, and we think mobile first. We've been talking about this for a long time, actually, mobile first, but it's not mobile only. So think mobile first in terms of that's how most of us start our research. We're in a car, not in a car hopefully, but in a taxi or in a train, and we start doing our, maybe we're acting on an impulse. We start doing the search, but by the time we get home, we tend to actually move to laptops or larger screen devices. We want to see the big imagery of the dress or the shoes that we want to purchase. That has a big influence on the decision-making process. So the way we curate the content, the way we individualize or personalize the experience there is really important. But the transaction, Jaimee, back to your point, may end up taking place in the majority of cases in store. So how you marry those two experiences is really important, I think, in going forward, especially after what we've been going through now with this massive shift in terms of buying behavior. Back to the earlier point, some of the the baby boomers now may start more of their research online versus what they did in the past. So we need to make sure we're connecting those experiences. Would you guys agree on that point?
Yeah, I'll jump in there. I think too, we have a lot of stores. We have over 200 stores, and so I think one of the things that we always grapple with is that we have these stores that don't physically look like, if they're 5 or 10 years old, they're not as up to scratch as what we would love. But they're very expensive to change, whereas our digital space is is much more cost effective to change. But I think what we have learned over the last couple of years is that the vibe that the customers get, the energy that they get, it's not the physical store so much as the team members that are in the store giving the same vibe, the same energy to each customer as we give them online. So that that's the common denominator, and that it's not that important to make sure that your stores all look exactly the same or have all had the latest refurb. That actually the feeling that they get walking out of the store is that they feel really good about what they've just purchased, and that they're on a high, and that they've just had that dopamine hit of great, this is, that was a really fantastic effort. I think that's far more important than actually the physical side of the store, and that energy needs to come through in all of the digital content more so than the quality of it or how expensive the shoot was. It's actually about the people in it and how much energy they give out.
Couldn't agree more, Jaimee. But it's very, at the end of the day, the people side of the equation is the most important. And again, Mark, I'll throw this thought over to you, because that's the one area that I feel that when people come and say to me, oh, have you got X technology that can help drive transformation? I'm like, yeah, I saw world-class technology, I can do that. But if you do not understand the people element of your equation, that is where the first point of failure is. You can have the most sexiest looking store on the planet, but if the people inside serving the customers treat them poorly, you're not going to go back in. Yeah. So yeah, Mark, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think 100% correct for both of you. We kind of talk about having a clear strategy, and that is from a business strategy, an e-commerce strategy, a customer strategy. It doesn't matter what, but you've got to have a plan. And then the next piece is experience design, right? So you've got to be thinking about the person that you're trying to serve and the journey that they're on, and really seeing the world through their eyes. And that they don't see those channels. I'm sure everybody on the webinar has heard people talk about this, ad nauseum, but they don't see channels. They just see a brand, and they have something that they're trying to get through. And there's, various drivers. It could be, educational, it could be an emotional driver, it could be an experience driver. Whatever that driver is, they're trying to get that done for an outcome, and you're trying to provide an experience that serves that. And then only then are capabilities important, because you understand what you're trying to achieve in the experience you're trying to create. The answer is not more technology, certainly not. The other interesting thing I was just going to add to that is, I think the acceleration of augmented reality and new business models that are getting applied to what, digital was new compared to physical, but actually there is some very interesting business models coming out at the moment. I sat through a pitch the other day on one where it was a virtual shopping mall, and essentially brands would have a virtual store in this shopping mall, and this shopping mall was made available to the world. So all of a sudden, Aussie brands and successful businesses in Australia have access to a world market, and the provider of this virtual shopping mall had solved the international distribution at a low cost rate, which is really interesting. It just changes the game completely. Totally. And it also, what it tied back to was ultimately going into a store is an experience, as is going into a digital experience or on an app or any other type of experience. It's an experience that someone is, obviously going back to what I was saying, is trying to get something done, and for various drivers. And if you understand those drivers, you can create these experiences and make sure that they're connected across your brand promise as well. So it's a really interesting space, and I think it's going to, obviously it has been evolving. I think it's going to evolve much more rapidly with the various economic factors that are going on at the moment, which are forcing brands to come up with unique ways to engage a new audience, perhaps they haven't engaged before, or keep their audience engaged, because there's so much competition in the digital space at the moment.
Oh God, I've got a comment I want to share as well. Ali, is that okay? I know this is a great conversation.
Absolutely.
I'm really enjoying it. You guys are getting my brain juices all fired up. So I want to link something you said, Mark, back to what Jaimee was saying earlier, and in terms of the opportunity for brands that are listening. Again, we get back to this notion of the behavioral changes we've discussed about, the fact that we are becoming more digital engaged, and that's only going to increase exponentially. And the need to not measure success by how much sales I push through e-commerce versus retail, but looking at the blended view of that. And Jaimee, back to your point earlier, I mean, like that, if I'm coming into a store, there's a lot of hurdles I've got to overcome. I've got to get the kids in the car, I've got to drive the car into town, I've got to fight the traffic, I've got to park the car. And then if I get in the store, to your point, the experience is not great because of the individuals, or even if they didn't have the things in stock that I've come to purchase, because I've looked online, I've found a pair of shoes that I think I really want to buy, that can be a really disappointing experience. So this is where, if you can connect a stock that's available to the digital experience and know that they're in store, and I'm making that trip in, which I'm planning to do because I'm going to pick up stuff at Coles, you're actually creating a great experience, which is actually happening more at a subconscious level. There's not a conscious. That's where I think the real trick, and we don't understand, we need to invest time in understanding the emotional drivers that are heavily at play when it comes to how we rate an experience. And it happens at a conscious and subconscious level. This is where when you start getting the neuromarketing and really understanding that was also really important, because that scenario that Jaimee, you alluded to, I think is a really important one. And how we can solve for that is by blending those two worlds together. I don't know if you guys agree.
Yeah, a couple of years ago we had, it was again on my favorite spot on our website on the live chat, and and what I was finding is this just really the wording around customers who wanted to know what our stock levels were in stores. And so if the report had come to me that said I had 3 customers this week, contact me on chat and say that they would like to know what the stock levels are, I would have taken that in a completely different way to being right there on there with these customers, not just asking for the stock levels. They're like, I can't find it. You haven't got the buttons in the right spot. Like, they were just assuming it had happened. So it was an expectation that it was there. It wasn't a request of, it would be great if you had this. It was an expectation that those stock levels in the stores would be there. So I think there's a lot of customer experience that is an expectation that, like you said, it's subconscious. It's like, here's the benchmark, but unless you've sort of managed to get into the minds of your consumers and found where that benchmark is, you could be upsetting a lot of them and not even realizing, and working on things that you thought were important that aren't.
I am going to cut in because as much as I love this conversation, it could go on for hours. We only have a few minutes left, and I do have some questions from the audience that I'd like to throw in.
No worries, go for it.
By the way, this is a fantastic conversation, and you've answered most of my questions that I have written down as well. So you guys are just smashing it. We do have a question. Did you previously consider your in-person store to be the main point of contact for customers, or was online already trending that way prior to lockdown? So Jaimee, I'm going to throw that one to you.
We don't have really great data on sort of solid data on that, but definitely anecdotally from the customer teams there's definitely a lot of customers who seem to come in store thinking that there's, I've seen this online, I want to purchase this now, I can see that you should have it in the store. We've got this really interesting space now where the poor person in the store only knows a very small amount about the things that they sell in the store, but the customer who has researched what they're looking for online becomes the expert because they've done the research, they know. And so you end up, it's a really interesting space where the team member used to be the expert. I'm going to sell you the features of these shoes, and I'm going to tell you all about why you need these. It's actually the customers sort of already made the decision for the most part once they've walked in because they've already done their own research. So that's definitely been a big part beforehand. Yeah, for sure. That trend has probably been more, it's more to purchasing online rather than coming in store, more so come COVID. Just I think purely like you said before, like our core customers got to get the kids in the car and they've only got a limited amount of time that they can be outside. The feeling of not feeling comfortable having their kids shopping with them, all of those kinds of things probably plays a part.
Absolutely. And does anyone have anything to add to that, or any thoughts that they wanted to throw in?
I think Jaimee covered that well. Yeah, I'm acutely aware you got more questions and less time, so I'm happy to move on.
Actually, Nicholas, you did mention a channelless sort of approach to everything. We have a question asking, is treating the customer as channelless even more important in this half of 2020?
Yeah, I definitely would say that. I mean, we've talked, and I've been part of this conversation. Mark's been part of it. Omni-channel for a long time. The problem with omni-channel, I shouldn't say it's a problem. I still think it's a core strategy, but it's become very technology-centric conversation. Yeah, all of us technologists and those involved in the ecosystem tend to look at it through that lens. And what I'm challenging people to do is think about the customer first. I know it sounds obvious, but I see this mistake continually made. Let's start with what drives her in making decisions. What triggers that at first, a reaction in terms of emotional reaction as to why she begins her search on Google. Understand that journey in terms of what we just spoke about between Jaimee and I about the journey into the store. Really spending time and understanding that. Understanding the employee's perspective and how they support that is absolutely critical as well, because they're part of this channelless experience. So how do we marry those two views together and ultimately then work back? I mean, someone much smarter than me said it well, beautifully well. Steve Jobs said, start with the experience and work back to the technology. Don't get me wrong, the technology is going to be critical in your ability to ultimately deliver it consistently and at scale. without a doubt. That's where, you know, companies like myself, Adobe, can step in and help provide the core capabilities and technologies there. Obviously, partners like Mark and you know, in terms of his business, are also a critical element of that journey. So again, I would be really advising customers to also select really great partners that are passionate about their business, that really understand the intricacies of their industry and also their business, and are going to be on a journey, because it's only through that partnership you will be able to solve for that. But yeah, definitely start and consider the channels experience first, and really look at that through the lens of both the customer and the employee.
Absolutely. And Mark, I'll ask you the same question.
Yeah, I think I don't want to labor the point. I think Nick's, you know, made it quite clear in terms of the reasons why that is an important approach. I just come back to, you know, you have to have a very clear view of who your customer is, and what they're trying to get done. And I think the theme that was throughout much of this conversation comes back to the concept of convenience. And so convenience is just purely because people are short of time, and also things need to be predictable for them for all the reasons we've discussed today. So I think absolutely it's seeing the world through the customer's eyes. I just have to say, you know, the reason why people go back to channels is it's a human condition to get back to what you can control and put into various buckets. And I think the most valuable asset or artifact to help you do that is very clear sets of customer personas and customer journeys and the experience points along those customer journeys. And if an organization truly collaborates around that mindset, then they will move away from thinking about channels, because they will be truly thinking about the customer as opposed to the various channels in their business that serve them. And I think actually now more than ever, it's an opportunity to break away from what has traditionally been the predominant channel for retail businesses, which is the physical channel, right? And now it's an opportunity to rethink that, because we've got conditions that we've never had before, and now we need to chart a course for the future of our collective business.
Just a very quick
pop that in a.
Oh, sorry, Jaimee.
Sorry, I just want to say, like, you know, as a retailer, I sit in a lot of these kinds of webinars, and I hear a lot of, you know, a lot of those words, and I get them. But for me, I think what really helps for me to understand, you know, and get away from those buzzwords is, you know, if you look at, you know, I don't know if you guys watch much Netflix. Surely everyone has over the last few weeks, if not before that. But, you know, Brooklyn Nine-Nine is one of my favorite ones at the moment. And I've got to tell you, so they're detectives, right? And when they're trying to solve a case, they literally give themselves personas. If they've got an old lady who's lost her purse, they're literally like, I'm the old lady, where would I go? And that's, you know, when we're talking all of these buzzwords about, you know, personas and journey mapping and all of those things, and it can get a bit like, oh, that sounds like a lot of work. That's literally all it is going, right, if I was a little old lady and I was coming into the shop, like, how would I get into the store? Would I trip over that box? Is the lighting good enough? You know, it's about being that detective and kind of really looking at how those journeys happen, and not from a piece of paper in the office, but from a like really like getting in there and doing it.
Spot on, Jaimee, and bringing also, I think, on that journey all the relevant. I mean, it's bringing the entire organization into that process as well, because this is the other thing. You know, we often think of it through a front office lens, but also having the back office involved in that process. You know, because the supply chain, logistics, all of these elements play such a critical role in that experience. No one remembers DHL or FedEx as being the point of failure. They remember the brand that didn't deliver the goods. So I think you spot on in that respect. So yeah, great point.
Yeah, that's so true too.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I just want to give you all a really big thank you for all of the time that you put in and the time that you've taken out for this webinar. I think it's just been incredible. And if we had an extra hour, I know that we could even, you know, talk even more and elaborate even further. But for now, this is the only time we've got. So if we didn't have time to answer any of your questions, feel free to reach out to some of the speakers today, whether it's on LinkedIn or email or whatever, and I'm sure they'll get back to you. And again, thank you everyone for joining. I hope you all have a lovely afternoon. Stay safe, and we'll see you at the next webinar.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.